Okay, so this little video is just to explain to you about what we mean by the term productivity, and actually you'll see that it comes in two different forms. There's gross productivity, which I'll explain to you is basically the amount of chemical energy available in the plant biomass, and there's net productivity, which is the amount available for the plant to actually grow, and of course for other organisms to eat. So I'm going to go on to explain to you what those two terms mean, and have a little look at some calculations that we can do. Make sure you have a look on the independent study guide so you're clear on what the objectives are for this section, so you know what you could be asked about in the exam. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is something called the gross primary production, and I'm sure most of you can remember from your work at GCSE that actually the vast majority of light that shines on a plant isn't actually used by the plant in photosynthesis. And the reason for this is that actually the vast majority, well over 90%, is actually just reflected away. Of the 10% that's available, therefore, for the chlorophyll, actually not all wavelengths of that light are absorbable, as we well know from our work on photosynthesis. In addition to that, even if there is some wavelength that it's able to absorb, not all of the light, the correct light, is going to hit the chlorophyll. Some's just going to miss it and go straight through the plant. And finally, what little light is actually able to hit the chlorophyll, it's possible that there is some limiting factor around that's actually going to prevent photosynthesis from going any faster anyway, such as obviously low carbon dioxide level, for example. So scientists have come up with this term, gross primary production, or GPP, to basically describe the total quantity of chemical energy stored in plant biomass in a given area or volume, as you saw on the previous video about biomass, in a given time. And as you will remember from GCSE, in practical terms, that only equates to just a couple of percent of the total energy available from the sun that actually is then made available to the plant on the food chain. Okay, so GPP basically tells us how much chemical energy is available at any one time, but of course plants will be using up a fair bit of that. Textbook suggests sort of 20 to 50% will be being used by the plants. So basically what's left over is what we call net primary production. And again, that can be represented by an equation. So the net primary production is basically a relationship between the gross primary production, which is, remember, the amount of energy available in the plant, minus the respiratory losses. So obviously that's what's being used up by the plant in respiration. Okay, so net primary production, or NPP, is basically the chemical energy that's available for the plant to grow and reproduce, but it's also the chemical energy that's available to the other trophic levels. So obviously the primary consumer would have access to that and be able to pass that on. So that's what the net primary production, or NPP, is. Okay, so this NPP, this net primary production, that's obviously available to the plant to use in growth and reproduction, but also, as mentioned, available for the other trophic levels. As again you will remember from your work at GCSE, the transfer of this up through the food chain is actually also in itself really inefficient. Okay, there are lots of reasons for that. You will have talked about at GCSE, but again I will just recap that for you. Okay, so some of that NPP is actually lost in respiration in an organism, especially in your homeotherms, your mammals and your birds, things which need to keep a regular control their body temperature, so they will lose a fair bit of NPP through that. Of course, when eating another organism, especially as you move up through the food chain, not all of that organism will be eaten. So when caterpillars eat leaves on a tree, they don't eat the entire tree. When foxes eat hares, they don't necessarily eat every last bit of it, so not all of it's consumed. The stuff that has been consumed, not all of that will necessarily be digested. So good examples of that would be, of course, when organisms eat cellulose, that becomes fibre to them, and that's just passed out in the faeces. So it's not digested and absorbed by the body. So again, it can't be passed on, and it's lost to the environment in faeces. And the last one you would have done all this at GCSE, but the last one is excretion. So that's as a result of chemical reactions in the body and then losses through there. So of course, urea, result of protein breakdown. You may well have digested those proteins and absorbed them into your body, but then they've been broken down and excreted as urea. So that's lost from the biomass available. So NPP is hugely decreased as you move along the food chain through the trophic levels. Okay, result of that is that you get a maximum of 4, maybe 5 levels. Was just not enough energy to be passed on to support those organisms, enough of a breeding population for the organisms at the top of the chain. So it would fizzle out and you wouldn't be able to support that. Linked with this, of course, is that the total mass available in any one place will be lower as you get higher up the food chain. Again, the number of organisms. And again, GCSE classic exam question. This is the reason why biomass pyramids are actually pyramid shaped. Because as you move up through the trophic levels, NPP is reducing for the reasons just said, and therefore the amount of biomass available reduces at each trophic level, which results in this classic pyramid shape, as you can see. So lastly, we can actually look at an equation looking at the net production for our consumers then. So it's not called net primary production because it's not coming from the producers. It's just called net production. But actually we have this equation which can represent the losses that we've just discussed, those from feces and respiration. And we can represent that using this formula, relatively self-explanatory. So F are the losses that we talked about that come from material that's passed straight through, so not undigested, egested material. We've got R representing the respiratory losses of the consumers. Again, remember, especially high for the homeotherms, the animals which have to control their own body temperature. And we have I, which is the chemical energy available. Okay, it's I because it's actually the chemical energy that's been ingested by the organism, because obviously we are talking about the consumers here. So hopefully you can see where these random letters have actually come from. The I for ingested, F for losses in feces, R for losses in respiration. So that equation then gives us the net production for the consumers that's able to be passed on to the next level. Okay, so in addition to the NPP and GPP type calculations, which we'll go over a little bit more in lesson, and quite often they can ask you about percentage efficiency, which is very well the same basically as what you would have done at GCSE physics, and you would have also, to be fair, done it at GCSE biology. Standard classic equation, which is going to be output over input times 100. So that's what you would have done at GCSE. So just to give you a worked example, okay, so this is actually in the main AQA textbook, but just to make life easy for you, I've just taken a snapshot of that and displayed it. If we want to calculate the percentage efficiency of the transfer of energy from the trout to humans, using that equation, you will get 50 kilojoules meter squared per year for the humans, divided by the 250 from the trout, multiplied by 100 to turn it into a percentage, gives you 20%. So hopefully that's relatively straightforward for most of you, no problems with that. What I'd like to now do then, please, is answer the question at the bottom there for question 1A and question 1B. Again, show your workings, and the answers are in the back of the textbook, so you can just double check those. Okay, again, this is the next sort of maths a little bit out of the textbook, just keep following on from there. Again, I would like you all please to have a go at this now. I've basically gone over everything that you would need to calculate this, and I know lots of you will feel very confident and won't have any problem. obviously I'm not gonna go over them all because most of it's straightforward and the answers are in the back of the textbook, but I am just going to specifically talk about question 5. So again, please have a go. If you feel confident enough, have a go first. But if not, then listen to me explaining how to do question 5. Okay, so it's asking to calculate the amount of energy that is lost as heat from plant-eating insects. Okay, so I can see straight away that my input here is that they have 4,120 kilojoules per metre squared per year. Okay, and I can see straight away that 810 is passed on. So I can account for that. I can also see that from the plant-eating insects, 1,010 is lost to box A, which I'm not going to talk about because that's obviously the answer to question 1. So if I take those two from 4,120, I get 2,300 kilojoules per metre squared per year. Okay, must be lost as heat. And if you weren't exactly sure how to do that, then you could just go and double check that the other ones were done like that, sort of to prove that you were right. So for example, if we take the green plants, that was 42,500 again, minus 4,120, because we know that got passed on there, minus 14,130, because we know that got past the box A. If you do the maths on that, that leaves you with 24,250. So you can like double check from one that has got all of the numbers plugged in that actually what you've done is correct. But I know lots of you will find that really easy, so obviously great. But for those of you that struggle slightly with some maths, that's one way of double checking that you're right. So please have a go at those and then self-mark those at the back of the textbook. So in your lessons, we will be going over some past paper exam questions, looking in particular at productivity and some other bits and pieces on biomass.